think there's just an energy in the air that.
Okay, we're going. Hello. Hi.
Well, imagine meeting you here.
We're doing a different, I'm going to try a couple of little layout things. So what'd you think of that, the new intro?
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I'm impressed. I'm liking it. We're upgrading.
It's fun.
Is it fun? That's great.
We are.
There.
So, hi everybody. Let's see who's joining. Let's see. I see Larry's on here. Hello, Larry. Nora, Michael. Nice. And Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Glad you're joining us. So I'm going to put hers up there.
So what does everybody think of our new logo? Yeah. That's some of Sandy's genius there.
Sandy has been stirring the pot.
Oh, yeah.
In the production lab.
The creative juices are bubbling over right now.
Well, I do that for consulting work, and for whatever reason, I wasn't focusing on it on my own.
So you weren't consulting yourself?
No. I should have, but
like the cobbler's children have no shoes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was in Zimbabwe, a few years ago, and I was shocked that when I saw all the stonemasons, because they're really, really good at doing stonework, and then you go to the stonemason's house and the walls are all crooked, and you're like, "What the heck?" He's like, "I don't have time to do it right."
That's where they practice.
That's right.
Hey,
Wow!
all of
Look
our
at everybody popping up on our screen.
I know. I'm getting snazzy, aren't I?
I'm telling you, I am so impressed. I feel like we should. We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
Okay. Hi, Heather. Hi, Michael. Hi, Tina. Hi, Nora. Let's say hi to all of our peeps. Tonight we have a special guest with us.
Really?
He's
what did
special.
You dig him out?
He's special.
Special.
He is special. He's
yes,
an author of
needs.
2 books. How many books, Bob?
2.
2. Has 2 books, and we're going to discuss
a few more on my
latest.
computer that I haven't had the courage to publish yet.
Oh, awesome. Hey, welcome, Steve. So, there's Larry. Hey, hey.
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 Yabba dabba do.
So, anyway, thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're going to talk about, I know I've been talking about Bob's book for a couple weeks now because I finally started to read it. I got it from a couple of weeks ago, and yes, and look, Suzanne has it. There you are. In the company of Joseph. So we're gonna ask him a couple questions, and Suzanne, do you want to start with a question?
I sure do.
Okay.
Well, so Bob, in the company of Joseph, when the past becomes the future. So my very first, very sophisticated question is, what the heck is the company of Joseph? Because you have a story for that, I know.
Well, I use the word company not as like an incorporation. I'm not talking about a business entity. I'm talking about a particular type of people. And for the last 40 years in my universe, the figure of Joseph has been very prominent, because I've felt for many years that those kind of people with those kind of callings and giftings and kind of things were going to take a very more prominent role in the days ahead, because things were going to get a little chaotic, and it has turned out to be. So that's where the word Joseph Company. So it's basically in the company of Joseph Company. There, it's interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
But the biblical Joseph is sort of a model, a type. However you want to, whatever way you want to, sort of frame it. He represents a particular kind of spiritual calling that's not typically talked about, because we live in our modern religious world is pretty much defined by an institutional church worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say Christian or you say Christianity, people think of churches, they think of buildings, they think of religious leaders who stand up every Sunday morning, they open up their Bibles, they give some sort of exegesis. And so the whole focus becomes church centric. And what I'm talking about is the fact that actually most of what God's done through history's actually happened outside of church through people that aren't actually on staff at churches. But we don't talk about that. It's sort of strange. We never talk about that in church. We only talk about the guys that are on a staff at a church or who preach. And so it's been my heart to try to expand our spiritual worldview.
So Bob, how long have you kind of been working on this book?
Well, I actually started on it about 5 years ago. And it's an interesting story, what behind it, because I have a friend whose name is Brad Cummings, and Brad was the editor and co-writer for a book called The Shack. And so about 5 years ago, he and I had a meeting together out in California, and I was talking about this whole Joseph concept, and he goes, "Man, you ought to write a book about it." And I said, "Well, it's funny you should ask or say that. I actually have a USB drive here with the beginnings of a manuscript on it." And of course, he jumped out of his chair and said, "Hey, can I take a look at it?" Well, he read through it. I mean, it was a 200-page manuscript at that point. And then he came back to me about 3 months later and went, "There's actually 2 books in here. You're moving way too fast. So why don't you just split the book in half and write me another whole." So I sat down and spent another year writing another 200, right? Well, then by the time we got done, we had 4 books. So this one was actually just the beginning. There's 3 more that are sort of sitting there. So he was the one. Then what happened is that after we got ready to knuckle down and focus on this book, he came back and he says to me, "You keep talking about the Josephs and you describing them, but you're not explaining to me and the reader why they are important. Why do you think in this hour of history, these type of men and women are going to take such a prominent role?" And I said, "Well, I don't really want to talk about that." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I want the focus of the book to be on this type of person, this Joseph type entity." And I said, if I start talking about that, the book's going to take on this sort of apocalyptic end time. So I don't want to be Hal Lindsey and write another late great Planet Earth. You know what I mean? I don't want the focus of the book to be end times and foreboding. Right. He said, "Yeah, but you're not explaining. You've seen something, and you know why these type of people are so important." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I want to hear it." So then I went back and spent another 3 months writing the first 3 chapters and doing all the research, because I knew what was out there. I just didn't want it to come off wildly prophetic and me just talking about pulling stuff out of the thin air. So what I did was I actually went back and referenced everything that I wrote. So everything in the first 4 chapters that I talk about what's coming is all, factually backed up, because what's coming is actually already here. It's just that the public isn't aware of what's going on. So
Right.
then that's where that all. So we ended up putting the front of the front of the book was actually written at the end.
I
Does that make
gotcha.
sense?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So that
So
for anybody that's written a book out there, what it goes through in terms of editing and reformatting, it's a crazy experience.
So how many hours would you write in a day?
Oh, all day.
All day.
I had some lovely friends who had a cabin down on the Lake of the Ozarks, and I went down there, or actually it was on Table Rock, and I went down there for 3 months in the winter and just wrote and researched, and it was perfect because it was quiet. And
so since no one knows what the beginning of the book is about, can you give us just a little summary about the technology that you're talking about in the beginning?
Well, what I'm trying to get people to understand, is that, technology is something that we all take for granted. It's interesting, because in 1999, I worked for a company here in Kansas City called Net Sales. And Bob Fraser, who was the CEO, had developed one of the first proprietary softwares to be able to do a transaction online. So here, this was 20 years ago, but we did the first sale, and we were selling software at that time, downloadable software. But now 20 years later, it's like it's just normal. Like my grandkids growing up, they just think it's always been like that. My kids. So IT technology, all of it is so integrated into our lives. What most people aren't aware of is the people that are driving all of this, how they think, what their worldview is. And what I try to explain in the book is that the people that are driving our future world view humanity as the weak link in the evolutionary cycle.
Okay.
They see us as frail, weak, vulnerable, emotionally unstable, blah, blah, blah. And so what they're building is a world that's basically what they're driving at is they're trying to eliminate the human element out of our culture, out of our society, and make everything works better if a machine can do it. And that's driving everything right now. So everything you're going to see over the next couple decades is all driven by the fact that you're frail, weak, not good. Right now, where I'm trying to talk about in the book, they would not understand this, but what I warn people about is the fact that the delusion they're under is they think humans are like machines, that we're electronic impulses, and that we're driven by, we're like little computers. Our minds are little computers, but that's not true. The biblical worldview or the spiritual worldview is we're body, soul, and spirit. Well, they're going to be able to augment our bodies and improve on them, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff already in the works. They're going to be able to increase the capacity of our soul, which is our mind, emotions, and our will. They'll be able to control that. But the thing they can never recreate is your spirit.
Right.
And what they don't realize, they don't understand this, because, most of what's ironic about the people driving our world, this is one of the great paradoxes, is they're all antisocial.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yes.
Anybody that has an IT department at your company understands exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I remember at Net Sales, here, all of us that weren't IT guys were trying to build a corporate culture. So we brought in pool tables and ping pong tables and all kinds of things so that we could have these breaks 3 or 4 times a day where we all could get together and socialize, and no one ever came out of their cubicle or out of their office. They spent their whole break time playing each other on games.
Right.
Human interaction is very, very difficult for them. That's one of the ironies of the whole tech world was driven by people who really didn't want to socially interact. That's easier for them to interact through a screen. Have a buffer. And they're the ones designing our world. Everything that's happening right now is all being driven by people with that kind of an emotional, mental kind of worldview. So they think, the guys that are driving Google, Apple, Microsoft, these big companies, they all believe that if they can take computer technology and integrate it with humanity, that we will reach another state of evolution.
Right.
And they talk about a thing they call a singularity.
Right. Okay.
And the singularity is when they've perfected a biological implant into our brains that we can then plug into the net.
Yes.
And Ray Kurzweil at Google believes that when that happens in the next decade, we will become gods, because we will suddenly now have access to all information.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw the news recently, but Elon Musk is got a company called Neuralink.
Yep.
And he's working feverishly. And the irony of Elon Musk is that Elon Musk has been one of the most outspoken critics of all of this technology. And as I write about in the book, he basically says we're summoning the devil. That's basically what. But he's so like everyone else, which is their egos are so big, they all have to be the guy that is the one who breaks the new frontier, right? So even though he's scared to death of everything that he's doing it anyways.
Wow.
But he's doing it under the auspice that he can, help with epilepsy. He can get paralyzed people walking, and this is one of the tensions that you deal with, is that a lot of the things that are driving, the motives that are driving a lot of this tech is sincere.
Right.
Wanting to do good things. The dilemma that nobody knows what to deal with is evil.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm warning about, is because the truth of it is that all through human history, right, we've had people driven by evil, right, who are driven by the lust for status and stuff, and they will, and we keep having all these rules, you know what I mean? The Congress is passing rules, Parliament, and the EU, everybody's passing rules, as though evil cares about rules.
Right.
You see what I mean? It's sort of naive. There's this naivete in the, like, we're going to make all these good rules, and that's going to save us from the evil people.
So what is the main theme on what you want to convey in your book? What's the message that you want people to take?
Well, I want people to understand that the world is changing. See, when I published the book, the first line in the first chapter is I talk about the fact that change is going to come very soon and very quickly. In fact, over the next 20 years, it's going to change more than the last 300 years combined. And the reason for that is because of the knowledge curve. And I talk about what that is and how knowledge is accelerating, and it's moving really, really quickly. So the reason that I published the book in February was I was trying to get people to realize this change was coming. Well, when it first came out, a lot of my colleagues and especially some within the religious community accused me of being melodramatic. You know what I mean? That I was like over the top with my warning that change was coming, right? Well, then by the end of March, I started getting people calling me going, well, how did you know? And I said, well, I mean, I don't want to, to take, to take kudos for things that I did. I never predicted that COVID was coming. I never said there was a disease coming. I didn't know what was going to be the accelerator. But what happened is this bug turned out to be an accelerator, because if you notice everything that's happening right now, what's the solution, right? It's all about more technology. That technology is more invasive, right?
Contact tracing, etc. Yeah.
You see, because technology can do it better.
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Technology's fairer. Technology, and the people that are driving this, they see technology as the savior of the world. They believe that
Wow.
we, that humanity can develop technology that will save us.
Right.
Oops, Bob.
Right.
So, backing up, you use the term unaware population,
Right.
and then you go on and you're talking about the dark web of ignorance, and it's just kind of naturally where we are as a society. We're things are just happening so fast, and most of us don't take time to really consider these things. So, like, what are you? I mean, you're one voice, and you also then start talking about that. Like we as Christians need to be voicing and not, what do you say, echoing.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you what's your vision of what we might be able to do actually to not be ignorant and to have a voice and to maybe save this
Well, one of the things I do,
youth?
one of the things I stayed away from in the book, because I didn't feel like the first book should address this, is I didn't talk about solutions. What I
Right.
focused on was two things. One, change is coming quickly and significantly. Two, when change happens, there's always an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So when crisis develops, right, when we're in the middle of crisis, while there's a whole lot of things falling apart, there's incredible opportunity. And I learned that from my grandfather. My grandfather was a stockbroker on LaSalle Street in Chicago. When I was a young guy, we were studying the 1929 stock market crash. Of course, it was sensational because we heard people were jumping out of buildings. So we drive down to Chicago, and me and Grandpa are sitting there, and I asked him about it. And I said, "Hey, did that really happen? Like, did you see people jump out of buildings?" And he laughed and he said, "You know what, son?" He said, all you hear about the Great Depression is how many people lost everything." He goes, "What nobody will tell you is all the people that became millionaires because they saw opportunity in crisis." He goes, "People that bought distressed assets for pennies on the dollar, right? The people that were desperate were getting rid of stuff. The people that had cash were buying it. And all of those people became super wealthy later." I posted an article on my Facebook page, I think it was this morning, about the whole food cycle in America, right? And how right now what's starting to happen is because some of the traditional systems have broken down, there's this incredible opportunity if you can grow food to actually sell directly to restaurants or to what I mean. It reminded me of when I was a kid. We had I don't know if you guys had it here, but in Milwaukee we had the fruit and vegetable man, and in our particular street it was an Italian guy named Leonard, and he had this big box truck. And he would just drive up the street, ring his bell, and all the moms would come out at the end of their driveways and go, "Leonard, what do you got for us today? What was the deal?" And of course, he was always peeling apples and giving them out to the kids. But we would buy all of our produce directly from him in his truck. Like he would bring it to us every day. He would do that.
So with your technology, I noticed Bonnie had said a comment. She got a notice about receiving a new contactless credit card. What do you think about this cashless society?
Well, it's not much to think about. It's all going to happen. I mean, it's
pretty escalated right now.
It's all it's
very escalated.
So
right now.
One of the points. So getting back to your point, Susan. One of the things that the reason I wrote the book is one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, what are our values? Right? I mean, if you think about it, our values are where we invest our time and money. It's how we live. And a lot of us really don't think about it. It's like these, we just have assumptions, it's like, and then until something happens, like there's a crisis, we lose the loved one, suddenly then we realize, oh my gosh, I value that, I know, you hear this all the time from people who have had cancer or who have, had a death experience like our last guest. Suddenly when they come back, they survive, they value life. They don't take it for granted. Right? There's so many things in American society that we take for granted. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is get people to stop for a minute and go, what do you value? You better decide what your values are, because there's a whole group of people out there who have a very different set of values. And the top of their list is the word efficiency. Efficiency. What drives business? Efficiency. So the reason why technology is going, you cannot stop it, is because there's all kinds of people out there that want to make money. And in order to make money, they need efficiency. And so all the tech people are going to keep providing exactly what we need. So that's what I talk about, the cycle. This cycle. You can't stop what's coming, because it's all sounds so good and it makes our life better. One of the things I also wrote about in the book, I mentioned a guy who I believe is very, very prophetic, a guy named Neil Postman, who wrote a book in the 80s called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he talked about that, but he had no idea in the 1980s where technology would be, because it used to be, you would go, you had your little television. But in 1982, in our church here in Kansas City, we had the VP of marketing for Sprint came to the church. And one day he walked into my office. We had this conversation, and he said to me, you won't understand this, but he said, the world is about to change dramatically. He said, you are going to see the world from a little rectangular screen. That's how the vast amount of humanity is going to relate to each other, right? This was in 82. This is when cell phones were like big clunky things. There wasn't even screens on them, remember? I mean, you could see the numbers, right? I mean, he was so ahead of his time. And look at us all now. This here,
it's our
we live by
life.
It's our whole world, and it's how the world relates. Kids from America relate to kids in Japan and Europe. We talk to each other. It's how Africans keep track of what's happening in America. All of their information comes through this little 3x6 screen.
Yeah.
And you start also talking about, I made a note about how Google has like overtaken what we used to rely on, prayer and discernment, from listening to God. I think that's the way I understood it. It's like, well, we'll just ask Google, because Google knows everything.
Yeah, that was my granddaughter. I mean, my granddaughter is now 11. I think she was probably 7 at the time. Her generation has already been programmed to believe that Google has the answers to everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is.
I mean, in everything she always says, Papa, we got to Google it.
Just Google it.
Right.
So I also noted in your book, the name Joseph is significant to you, correct?
Yes.
Just the name Joseph.
Yeah. I was given that name at birth.
Yeah, which is interesting. If anybody knows the story of Joseph, his story is amazing. I've always loved Joseph's story.
Well, and part of the reason I spend in the last half of the book focusing so much on Joseph's life is because for the last 40 years, I've worked with pro athletes. I've worked with people in the arts and entertainment world, people in the geopolitical and business world. And every one of the high achievers have dramatic stories.
Yeah.
Dramatic stories of huge failures.
Right.
Things going terribly wrong. Right. And yet in the end, ultimately, there's these things. But the crazy thing about it, and they never write about it, they never talk about it publicly, but virtually every one of them have confided to me that there were at least 2 or 3 situations that happened that they cannot explain. that there was some sort of supernatural, some sort of divine intervention because things happened that shouldn't have happened to enable them on their journey of success. And so a lot of them, are very scared of the institutional religious world, but they're very much believe in the hand of God, the sovereignty of God, the divine intervention of God, because they've seen it in their lives, because they know it's like, this shouldn't have happened.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and reading your book, and kind of talking about the Josephs out there, because there's many of them, right?
Right.
It's maybe
And
for that
Josephine.
person. Yes, and Josephines, the ones that feel like they don't fit in that box that Christianity, depending on where you're getting your information, maybe you don't fit in that box, and that was really I resonated with a lot of what you
with
said.
Joseph, right? I mean,
Yeah.
his own family, his own
Yeah,
church,
they threw him
right?
they threw him in a well.
Didn't understand him.
They threw him out.
He was strange. He was different. You know what I mean? He had these weird delusions, right? These delusions of grandeur. And so, he ends up becoming, going through this whole series of things. In fact, one of the chapter titles is Walking Backwards Up the Stairs. And what I am trying to communicate with that chapter title is that so often in this journey with God, you go through these situations which, based on everything we've been taught and everybody's perspective, you get a big fail stamped on it. Like, you failed. And I mean, Joseph just has a litany of failures, right? But then there's this suddenly moment that he has where he realizes that all of these supposed failures were actually a plan, strategic plan that was preparing him and placing him.
Right, and he didn't realize it until the end. Yeah.
But he didn't, and so often with God, you don't realize it except for in hindsight.
Hindsight is right. Yeah, I wrote down that quote. You quoted Wally Lamb in it. The seeker embarks on a journey to find what he wants and discovers along the way what he needs. And I love that. Like that is so, we think that this is what our journey looks like, and as we go through it and we stumble and we fall and we're imperfect,
right.
That is where we do.
And that's one of the other main reasons why I wrote the book. One of the, I don't know. I want to be careful here because I don't want to step on toes, but maybe I should. But there's a sort of a perception that religious leaders have created that if you can reach a certain state of spiritual status, spiritual whatever, right? That in that moment, suddenly you're qualified now. Right? You ticked all the boxes and you can be a leader, right? Except for the problem, and this is where why I have other books, because Joseph's just one type of this. But the Bible is filled with stories of failures, people that are broken and dysfunctional. Like, there's not anybody other than Jesus in the Bible who doesn't have personal issues to overcome.
I mean,
family dynamics.
But if you were perfect, would you have to lean on God, right? So you,
no, but
there's
a sort of a default. I see it I've been in so many religious environments where people are striving so hard to be perfect because if you can get there, then God can use you.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, you don't understand. He uses you in your brokenness.
Right. And if you're not authentic about that brokenness, that's what creates a whole different thing.
Well, you just said one of my favorite words. Authenticity. Because to me, when I read the Gospels, like when I read Jesus' bio, the thing that just sticks out to me over and over again is how much he loved being around authentic people. And he found sinners far more authentic than religious people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, isn't that an interesting twist? And so here he is, he's hanging around with broken people because he finds them more honest, right? You know, the guys down at the bar, you know, have a few drinks and they talk honestly, right? Than he would being with the church people who were pretending to be something they weren't. And I just get this impression that authenticity is way at the top of Jesus' value system.
Yes.
Mhm.
Brokenness and all.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely agreed. So what was your hardest thing to write about in this book? What was a tough topic?
Well,
Was there
the
a chapter
thing
that
that's
was
hard for
difficult,
me
or-
is you know, I love God's people, and I have a lot of colleagues in the ministry, but I think they're in trouble, and I didn't want to be the one to tell them they're in trouble. So let me give you, you know, I mentioned this the other day to some people, so let me just put something in a historical context because history repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
We're in a time period very similar to about 587 BC. And what happens in 587 BC is there's this crazy guy who's a part of the religious sect who God starts speaking to him when he's really young. And he starts telling him that he's going to judge the Jewish people and that his hand is on the pagan king of Babylon, and he's going to use this guy to come in there and completely do a makeover on this culture, right? Well, and this is Jeremiah. Of course, I'm talking about Jeremiah, right? Well, all of his religious colleagues try to kill him, right? And the political leaders are so threatened by him, they throw him in prison. And he, you know, his little buddy Barak keeps writing down all his prophecies and reading them off, you know, and then Jeremiah flees, like he runs away, right? And then what ends up happening is that the Babylonians come in. Now, why did the religious leaders not believe him? And here's why. Because their whole life was based around an institution, and that institution was the temple. This was the house of God, right? In their mind, there is no way that God is ever going to allow this sacred building to ever be desecrated, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is God's house. So, Jeremiah, you're an idiot, right? And all of our jobs depend on this thing standing. So no one listens to him, right? And what ends up happening is the Babylonians come in, they destroy the temple, right? And they take thousands of people, because it's basically, if you want to understand what they were doing, they were actually on a recruiting trip, because Nebuchadnezzar was building an empire and he needed smart people. That's where the Daniels and the Shadrachs and Meshachs, all those young guys that could write, were all basically taken captive so they could end up heading, you know, being governors and administrators over his expanding empire, right? So he's on this recruiting trip. That's what ends up happening. So suddenly all these Jewish priests are sitting in Babylon and they got no job. Right? No job. They have nothing because their whole world was centered on the building. Right? So what ends up happening is that God changes the expression of Judaism in a single generation.
Yeah.
And how we and that's in Babylon is where the synagogue developed.
Right.
Right. And it started out in people's homes, right? Because suddenly now there is no temple. All these religious leaders don't know what to do, but they've got their little Torahs, their book, you know, their 5 books of Moses. They've got their prophetic writings. They've got, you know, Daniel refers to Jeremiah.
Right.
Like Daniel realized Jeremiah was right later. So what ends up happening is they meet around and they're doing their little Torah stuff. And out of that comes the concept of the synagogue, which is what's been in place for 2,500 years.
Right.
So fast forward to 2020.
Right.
And we can't go to our synagogue or our churches.
Right.
And we don't have the leaders in front of us every week.
And that's what I tried
and
to
that's where the history is coming.
Yes.
I got you.
And that was hard for me because I came up through that world. These are my friends, my colleagues, and I'm trying to explain to them, you don't understand. Now, why, and there's a why behind this. And I believe that, again, getting back to your word you talked about, authenticity. I think what's happened, especially in the United States, is that we have become incredibly presumptuous about how spiritually powerful and how spiritual we really are. And we were talking about this earlier, that because of the fact we live in a political system that allows us religious liberty, and we have the number one economy in the world, or until the Chinese take over, we've had the financial capacity to build these huge churches, to have all these people on staff, to have these be the right. You take those two factors away, and the expression of Christianity in America changes drastically.
Yeah.
Right.
It has been
Now,
idolized.
why this is important is is that Jesus, or neither Jesus nor Paul, would recognize the religious world now. Like Jesus, this isn't going to get me in trouble, but hear me out on there. Jesus wasn't even a Christian.
No, he was a Jew.
Right? The word Christian doesn't even come into existence till 30 years after he's gone. So Jesus would have never understood the word Christian. Like that would have not even been in his vocabulary, right?
Right.
All of his teachings were relational.
Yeah.
Christianity was a relationally driven philosophy of about how we treat one another. It was focused on motive and our actions because of our value system. It was never centered around a facility. Paul, even when he didn't go to facility, I mean, he went to synagogues, but these were little, almost like little house churches. You know what I mean? These are small groups. There were no 20,000 member churches with auditoriums that you could have indoor football games in. You know what I mean?
Well, in the last 10 years, I've noticed the trend of people saying, I'm a Jesus follower, not a Christian. They will actually say, I'm a Jesus follower. Or because in other countries, their ethnic group, I'm a Hindu that's a Jesus follower. I mean, like they say their actual group, their ethnic group in context, and I'm a Jesus follower, though.
Right.
So that's what Americans didn't understand for a long time.
Well, and even in our missions work, and this is where I got myself in trouble with my first book, Saving Zimbabwe. When the Brits came to Africa, they equated the kingdom of Britain with the kingdom of God. So they were converting people to the British Empire, right?
Right.
Americans, when we go overseas, we're importing American Christianity. It's so strapped in our culture. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we have a very difficult time separating out the two things. You know what I mean? I mean, we think Christianity, what do they call it? Apple pie, what's the little ditty about, Chevrolet apple pie and something. Anyways, we sort of equate Christianity with our culture.
Right.
And it's not.
Right.
It's transcendent. It's something above, Jesus didn't come, and promote America. He promoted the kingdom of God.
Right. Yep.
So I know sometimes
the
Americans, because of our political freedoms, because we have this interesting country that's been so prosperous, and we call ourselves a Christian nation, whatever that is, and you know what I mean.
Right.
But it's all institutional form, and I have had this sense that it's been in God's heart to bring us back to a more relationally driven version of our faith, where we actually genuinely love one another. You know what I mean? That we learn to sacrifice. Dr. V, who we had on a few weeks ago, I mentioned him in my first book because one of the things we talked about was the fact that African culture is so communal. And he made this comment to me at one point. He said, well, we have to be.
And we do it without technology.
Right. But we depend on each other. We're poor.
Mm-hmm.
We need we have to share, right? The early church lived under persecution. Right? They had to be relational. They depended on each other for survival. You see what I mean? Right? We're those are all foreign things to Americans.
Right. They had to work together.
So we have to be really
yeah.
careful here when we talk about the strength of American Christianity, because, when you get around the world, I have to say, I find Chinese Christians far more stronger in their faith than Americans. I mean, and the reason is because they've suffered resistance. Right. And there's a principle in the DNA of life that God instilled there, and it's this: resistance builds strength. It's the way we go to the gym, we lift weights, we run. In the DNA of life, resistance builds strength. Well, the American Christian church has got zero resistance until recently. And suddenly now things are ramping up, and we're all crying like little babies.
That's because we don't
feelings.
Right.
Yeah, it hurts.
Right.
Hurts to get in shape.
So going forward, okay, so in your next couple books that you're going to write, what's the context?
To spill the beans. Well, no, I really want to develop this issue about the fact that most everyone God uses is broken.
Yeah.
And I'd like to develop that more, because I've got a whole bunch of material. I mean, I could take you all the way through. I mean, it's crazy, but the first family raised a murderer.
Right.
I mean, we didn't even get to the second generation, and we already got a murderer in the family, right?
That Cain.
I know. I mean, you go all the way through it. I mean, Moses and the conflicts with Aaron and Miriam. I mean, family squabbles. You know what I mean?
Right. There is not a perfect right.
I mean, God.
Maybe Elijah.
Then you get this one.
Maybe Elijah. Maybe Elisha. I don't know.
Well, no, but I love this one because it's just so you go to church on Sunday, and one of the things I mention in another manuscript is that the Bible is probably the most R or X-rated movie that gets scrubbed on Sunday mornings down to a G-rated movie, to where we have cartoon characters. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, I always love the Noah and the Ark story, right? And it's all really cute, except for Noah was so traumatized by everything, he gets drunk afterwards. You know?
Right. Well,
I mean, we go and talk about King David, and he's a man after God's own heart. He's a narcissistic, womanizing killer. You know what I mean?
Yes, he was. Well, that's like Elisha. Like, I had to do a Bible story on Elisha for the kids one time, and I started to read it, and I thought, no, I can't. No, I mean, his whole story is kind of depressing. He was depressed.
Well, I know, it's like Esther,
and
right?
It talked about fire, and I was like, I can't teach 2- and 3-year-olds this right now. Like, that's
well, it's
above
like Esther,
their head.
right? We teach all the little Christian girls about Esther, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that the reason she became queen because she was in the harem and she slept her way to the top.
Gosh.
No, but I'm just saying.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I get. Now you understand why I get myself in trouble, right?
Because
you
do.
Nobody wants to talk
Truth
about
is
the
terrible.
realities of what happened. You know,
Truth is horrible.
Like somehow. So we can't talk about that,
Right.
So we have a whole bunch of women all over the world that are praying people that call themselves the Esthers, not ever talking about the fact of how Esther became. Now, did she save her people? She did. I mean, it was amazing but how she got there is salacious. It's soap opera stuff. You know what I mean?
Is that book 5?
Hide any of it.
Well, I mean, and then you talk in the book about how God uses pagan culture to still do His work and to bring us together and to unify us. So I thought that was an interesting perspective.
One of the things that I'm driving at in the book, which I probably could have made this clearer, is that most Christians know the Jesus of the church. What's gotten lost is the creator of the earth. And you see that, like, if you go to the First Nations people, are stuffed on these reservations, and you talk to them there, they've never lost touch with the creator. The Africans haven't lost us. We have become so technology driven. Only 2% of us even live on a farm anymore. We're so far removed from the cycles of life and the creator, right? And so what I'm trying to get people to understand is there's this creator, and he's not limited by our church buildings, our religious organizations, or even people we think he should use. And so, you know, one of the things that I've had to come to realize through my life is that God uses everyone.
Yeah.
We may not like it. We may want to argue, you know, we have all these little theological boxes and little things we tick, you know what I mean? Yeah. But the reality of it is God's out there using some pretty interesting people. And the reason is because what we think we know gets in the way of what we don't know. So God needs people that don't know that they shouldn't do that.
Right. Right.
And so one of the ironies of innovation, right, is that rebellious people are innovators. Right? Everybody that's innovated is rebelled against the institutional mindset of that you can't do that or you can't think that way.
Right.
They broke the rules to be innovative.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
that's
talk
totally
about
true.
rebellion in the church world.
Yeah.
That will get you benched.
Yes, it will.
Right? Except for Jeremiah was rebellious. You know?
Yeah. And they all have a cookie cutter narrative.
Right.
And unfortunately, I've been, you know, that's my experience.
Well, and what's sad is so many people have had such bad experiences that at the moment you're seeing a mass exit out of institutional religion. You know, it's nearly 70% of the millennials who grew up in church won't even go back in a church. Yeah. So you've got that. Then you've got our age group, which the sociological term for us is the duns. And the duns are people that have been to church and sort of gotten tired of the programs. You know what I mean? It's like a program thing. And so what's happened in our age group is, and I have lots of friends that do this, is they get together with their friends 2 or 3 times a month, have wine, serve cheese, and talk about a book that they're all reading together, talk about their kids. They're back to early Christianity where it's relational, right?
Right.
You know, we're praying for each other because our granddaughter's got this issue, and our son and daughter's going through a divorce, or I mean, it's real. It's you know what I mean? It's family, and we've lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
But we kind of got that back with our quarantine. We got a taste of it, and I'm just wondering what do you think? How was I going to ask this? How much technology do you think is really okay? What do you think God thinks about this technology? It's not all evil. It's not all.
No, it's not.
It's
technology isn't good or evil.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not good or evil, and that's one of the things I point out in the book. What's good and evil is the heart of men. So. Yes. I mean, technology is going to do some amazing things. I mean, it's going to bring some incredible medical developments, you know, things. It's going to, you know, we're going to live longer, be healthy. I mean, there's all kinds of really cool things. There's lots of things that it's going to help, right? Where what happens, where the shift happens, right? Which is where the guys that are driving it are going. Is that they believe that artificial intelligence, AI, because of the fact that it is a machine and it's not controlled by human emotions, right? It doesn't know selfishness, doesn't have an ego, you know, it doesn't have all of those human frailties because of the fact that it has access to all information, that it can make decisions for all of us that are fairer, more equitable, wiser, whatever. And so what they believe that they're creating is they are creating God. That's where they're going with this. They believe that the Christian community and those that follow, you know, these ancient religions, they call it lore, you know, folklore.
Folklore.
that they are that we're fools, and they are going to create a God that actually can give us tangible results. Like it's going to solve problems. It's going to fix things. But in order to do all that, we have to give up our individuality, our rights. And what you're going to see is more and more, it's going to become your patriotic duty to give up some feature of your choice for the good of everyone.
Right.
Because it's,
Right.
and that's why I said this COVID thing is an accelerator. It's driving all of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
it's
everything.
just in the masks. I mean, you're getting mask shamed. You know.
So one of the things I point out in the book is driving.
It's crazy.
Right? And it's just a matter of a few years before the technology is the bugs are out. And by virtue of the fact that the machine can do it better, it's going to be your patriotic duty
to save lives.
Because you're going to save lives, right? You're being thoughtful of others. It's sort of like the mask right now, right? Put on the mask, be thoughtful of others. Right? Everything is going to be driven by this. But who's the one that is determining our values? You see what I mean? This is where it gets all very interesting. So who's going to be the arbitrator? Well, now we're going to have a machine, right? That has access to all knowledge. And I talk about in the book already, AIs have appeared in front of the UN and basically told the world that, give us the power to make decisions. We're wiser and fairer than you are.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's our so for those of us who are a little rebellious, what's our pushback?
Well, what I talk about in the book is we're basically coming to a collision point. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but what you are seeing in terms of a civilization that's fracturing is only going to get wider.
Yeah.
And this is just the beginning of a massive crack. And what I talk about in the book is that you see this in the garden. It started there, and it's been the same way for 6,000 years. In the garden, when God showed up and said, who did it? It was her fault. And she went, no, it wasn't. It was its fault, right? And humans have been doing this since the beginning. No one really wants to be responsible. We don't really want to say, I did it. We don't even want to make decisions. The vast majority of people would prefer to abdicate to somebody else so they don't have to be responsible. So what's going to be happening is that as this new world develops, there's a huge segment of the population that's going, man, sign me up. I don't want to make decisions.
Oh, wow.
Tell me what to do, where to go. And the reason is because what their number one value is security and safety. They want to feel safe. And it's going to be surprising, and you see it, right? But there's another whole part of the population who's wired very differently. And what one person thinks is a blessing, another person thinks is a curse. And so I think you're going to see a whole fragmentation of a whole lot of people in the way that I talk about in the book, because it's very real simple how it's going to happen. All your urban areas where you have massive amounts of people condensed in short and small geographic areas all have to deal with efficiencies. And they are all, that's what 5G is. 5G is a super highway for AI to run on, right? So that it can control, because they need to control the traffic, control all the utilities, control everything, right? Because they need efficiency, they need a system, right? We've got murders on, all these things, there's chaos going right now. And what people want is somebody get in control. We don't feel safe right now. Right? And so you're going to see this more and more. Technology is going to be the thing that's going to save us. There's a whole other group of people like myself who are like, I don't live in that kind of world, right? So what I talk about in the book is that for those people who don't want to live like that, you better start asking yourself, well, what does it look like to not live in that world?
Right.
And you better start developing your own way of living and your own communities and your own things. Otherwise, there's a certain point where you just don't have an option. It's too late.
Yeah.
So the reason why I released the book is to be a catalyst to get people to start thinking and start asking questions. Right now, everybody's a little bit like a deer in the headlights. It's like
Well,
no
it came
one
a
saw this
different way.
coming.
Yeah.
Everybody's life is right, and I'm trying to get people to understand. Get used to this.
Yeah. I think we are getting used to it because yeah.
Make decisions now, right? How do you want to live?
That's right. That's right.
Because watch what happens every week. There's another thing happening, and it's just going to keep happening and happening. And
it's not letting up at all.
Shocked at the technology already sitting there, and all the excuses to implement it are all there, right?
We keep going back to that quote. You have to know what you stand for, or you'll fall for anything.
Right. And well, most of us don't want to stand. We want somebody else to tell us what to stand for. I mean, this is the reality of it. Is it's hard to realize this because most of us, the three of us are really independent, but there's a whole population of people out there that don't really want to be responsible. No. They don't want to deal with it. So provide for me, take care of me, make sure I have food, a place to live.
They don't want you to make a wave either, though. They don't want you to push back and make waves either.
Right.
They're gonna shut you down. So, wow, that's it. Wow, this book. I mean, I read the whole thing.
It really was.
It's really good. You guys, and I'm gonna put. I tried to put it in the chat comments, but for some reason the link is not working, which I'm not sure why. So.
No,
it's fascinating. Very fascinating.
I just put it in the link if you guys want to take a look at it and buy his book. I mean, this book is.
Thanks for reading it, and I appreciate the questions. I mean, you've asked some really, really good questions, and of course, we're covering some huge topics.
Well, you can
in
only
a short period of time.
Chapter 1 we could have spent an hour on.
You only really went from chapter 1 to 4, possibly. The rest of it was really good.
The whole idea is hopefully I've planted seeds in everyone's soul but I'm not going to tell you what to do, right? Because I believe we all have to go on that journey. We're all Josephs or Josephines. Right. We all have our own path we're walking, right? Each of us are going through our own spiritual awakening.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have to find our own way because we each have a unique destiny.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I know that usually we try to do the most, I wanted truth. I mean, I want, that's what I see this Awakenings Within is about being authentic and truth. And
what I'm trying to stay away from is if you go to the Christian bookstore, there's always 3 steps to this, 5 steps to that, 7 steps to this.
Work like that.
It's like this formulaic kind of worldview. And I'm like, no. It's a relationship.
Yeah,
it's
I have all those books right over there. Yeah. I have all them.
I know.
And the thing is nobody has a cookie cutter walk. Everybody's walk is different because we're created different. So for you to say, you need to journal to hear from God, that's not true. That doesn't mean that you're going to hear from God that way. But some people He does talk to that way, right? So you have to figure out where you're hearing Him. I go to the beach, I can hear Him clearly at the beach, and that's just, don't know why, but that's just the way I'm made, that's my unique experience. So, that's the thing is everybody to find their path, their walk, what, that trying to seek that because you need to seek after that, don't just let things keep coming at you. You have to take an active role in your walk. You cannot just wait for God to just, lightning bolt
abdicate.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's just not. It doesn't work like that.
Procrastinate. Abdicate. There's
definitely read the story of Joseph. Most definitely go back into the Bible, read the story of Joseph, and then read his book. And then it will all be like, wow, just he in the book actually. And I'm just speaking on me reading it today, the rest of it. But in the book, he does tell the story of Joseph. So if you don't have time to go read it, you don't have to because he put it in the book. he summarized it, which was great. So anyway, thank you so much, Bob, and we really appreciate you being our guest this evening, and also being a co-host with us. We really do appreciate you and your wisdom,
you girls. Thanks.
You know, we definitely appreciate.
Our Joseph, and we're the Josephines. I like that.
Josephines.
All right, you guys. Thank you guys who joined us tonight, and everybody. You know, seek truth. That's what I'm going to put out there. Seek truth. That's it. All right.
All right.
Okay.
Night.
Bye, guys.
Great week.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, guys. See you Monday morning, 8:45.
All right. See you then.